very informative. You definitely deserve the spot here on the armchair. Thank you so much. Guys, I'm going to welcome another guest of mine here, please. It's Leonard, Head of Corporate Distribution and Customer Relationship in Zurich. Welcome, Rose.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
So thank you so much for joining me. I think that from here we maybe start with Christian with the first question, because it kind of follows nicely from all the insights you shared with us. So you mentioned that the whole Pledge for Flex program came out of the big, massive survey. And that's great. We can all do that in our organizations as well, no problem. We can ask people what they want, and ideally we want to give it to them. But I think this is where the glitch probably is, that not always what people want aligns with how our businesses operate at their best. So how did you, or how would you advise our audience to start the whole reconciliation plan between what employees ideally want and what suits the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's spot on in terms of that you need to reconcile in terms of what does the employee base need and want. But this is more or less the Christmas wish list. And then you have on the other side what maybe the business needs. And therefore what we did is indeed we did some data collection. So we asked the employees, so we did a huge survey. And this was helpful because only if you have data, if you have facts and figures, you can more or less see what is really looked for. At the same token, we also surveyed then the executives. We also surveyed in parallel what is our top 1,000 managers and asked them what do they see as being important. And when you have these two data points, you can certainly reconcile. But at the end of the day, I mean, and you saw this also when I was describing our Pledge to Flex program, this is all about empowerment, but very important, always along business requirements. Because at the end of the day, we are in the business of making business, so therefore this is front and center.
Very good. And because SAP is such a global organization, you had to obviously look at different people, different locations, multiple individual situations. Did you see any differences between different geographies, different countries that you operate?
Yes, absolutely. And once again, what we see also in the flex workspace is that one size doesn't fit all. This doesn't make sense. Therefore, the empowerment thing is also the solution, what we see. Theoretically, you have on one hand, of course, a lot of differences between geographies, and we all know this. Just think of Japan or China, where people rather like to be in the office because they don't have so much space at home. And then you have maybe people who are working or living in the US, where also because of the huge distances, it's sometimes much better to also work a little bit more remotely because then you can save the commuting time. So these, I think, are basic trends that you always have. And then in addition to that, next to the geographical differences, you also have differences between your lines of businesses. So in the sales area, you have a lot of people who are on the road anyway, so therefore they're not so often in the office. And then you have, for example, in our case, people who are doing R&D or innovation, our software engineers, they are, of course, much more in favor to come to the office on a regular basis. So one size doesn't fit all.
Very, very good. And Rose, how did the whole flexibility, working from home or hybrid arrangement work for you individually as a leader? And how did that impact greater Zurich business? Because there's always two sides of the story, personal and then the corporate.
Yes, well, certainly this time 2 years ago, it was a time of great anxiety and stress for many of us in Zurich. How are we going to get all our people operating from home, getting people set up with IT, getting people used to using WebEx and Zoom and MS Teams and so on. Our customers are corporates, many of them here in the audience today. We deal with companies and their employees. How are we going to interact with them? And on top of that, the markets had collapsed. The financial markets have collapsed. And really our business is about delivering performance, investment performance, so that people can have more money in their pension pot. So it was this time 2 years ago, a time of huge stress and anxiety. Our IT colleagues and our HR team stood up to the challenge and very much got everything set up for us, put in a lot of people supports, especially for people managers. We have a good wellbeing program in Zurich as well. That was definitely switched up a notch or two. And as it transpired then, one of the things we did commit on day one was to use our cameras for all of our meetings, whether it was a one-to-one meeting internally or whether it was a meeting with our customers. We decided to use our cameras on day one. We were advised to do that. So as time went on then, within 2 weeks, everybody was set up from home. And after a couple of months, we were finding there were huge benefits to this. In my own case, for instance, when I was dealing with companies, I found one morning I had a meeting with a company in Galway, Donegal and Cork in the same morning. That would probably be 2 or 3 days' work in the past. So there were some big benefits to it. The markets came back fairly quickly. Our operations team, they ended up being more productive as well because they were working in quieter environments at home with less disruption rather than an open plan office. So there were huge benefits to them too. And a lot of people were using their travel time, had decided maybe to be more productive with their travel time. One guy in the audience one of my colleagues took on a master's in his travel time and he's just almost at completion now 2 years later. So that all worked out very well.
And I'd say that some of the conversations that you would be having with your customers would be of quite personal financial matter. So I would rather take that call home than like in the middle of open space office or commuting.
Exactly. In the privacy of their own home was a benefit rather than, normally we might be presenting in a workplace, which may be in the staff restaurant or whatever, and there's other people around. So there's certainly huge benefits to that. And as it turns out for our own business, obviously the pub's been closed and restaurants closed was probably bad for a lot of people, but for Zurich it was good because people were saving more. so people were putting more money into their pensions and so on. The markets came back and it
There's
ended
always
up...
silver lining, in every situation. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I just want to bring the conversation into the hybrid model, because I think that realistically speaking, most businesses will operate like that. Of course, there will be businesses fully in the office, there will be businesses fully remote, but like majority of businesses will have a version of hybrid model. And in theory, we should be all having it sorted by now and tried and tested. But I think it's way more complex than we think because it's multiple layers to it for now and also for the future. Because what we've done already in the periods of the pandemic, we did and it's great, but it's probably not necessarily sustainable in exactly the same shape as it was happening. So I wanted to put a question to both of you. What role each of the factors should play to make sure that that employees are happy and productive and it's all working. And there's plenty of layers, but I'd like to put it maybe into even 3 aspects. So you have your role of flexibility itself. You have role of logistics of how to arrange that. You have technology, and then you have the personal human touch. So what's important, what's not, and in which constellation you see it working best? Christian, do you want to take it first?
Sure, yeah. I think what we are seeing is that number one, you need to cover all of these dimensions. So it's not that you can leave something out. So you framed it quite nicely. You need the people aspect, you need to cover the logistics or the space aspects, and you need to, of course, also make sure that you have the technology in place. And therefore, we feel you need to have holistic concepts, so kind of a holistic future of work agenda. And to make this more or less more concrete, what we feel is that you've got to take a look at this also from a consumer perspective. You've got to take a look, what does the employee look for? And therefore, when you're also an HR practitioner, how can you support maybe your employees and your managers or your employee base then during their time? And therefore, it's an interesting construct. On one hand, you are leveraging more technology because it's there and you can maybe also provide services remotely. At the same time, not sure how this is in your organizations, people are desperately looking for also to get back together and to mingle because we're all social animals, we're all human beings. And we love to be also in the office once in a while. So this human touch will not be fully replaceable for good reason. So therefore, it's important to have that mix of both things.
Absolutely. Rose, do you want to add anything to
very much agree with what Christian said there. That's very important to us as well. And even here today, our HR team are well represented here today, but so too are other people from Zurich, because it's very important that we understand HR leaders and understand HR teams and what they're thinking, what their issues are. So we've quite a few people here from other parts of the organisation, because really they want to understand, and the best way to do that is through informal networks like this, so this is very important to us. A lot of the other things, there's a lot of training we can do online, there's a lot of regulatory training, for instance, imposed on us working in financial services. online is fantastic for that,
yeah.
and doing it at home. But you know, we definitely encourage people to connect. You know, David talked about it this morning and made some good points, and certainly that's very important to us.
Absolutely. And then actually to follow on from that, like it turns out that about 1/3 of all employees never set a foot in their office, like ever since they started the opportunity. I would imagine that we have to make a special allowances to be interacting with that cohort in a little bit different manner. Like, to me, it seems like I personally choose to be in the office every day, but that's my own personal setting. Not everybody can or wants to do that, yeah? But I'd imagine you miss a lot of the human aspect. I mean, for those people, I'm sure they received a human aspect, but it was like through the screen. Like, it's very much not the same. We see it today, yeah? We all chose to be here personally rather than interact through the screen. Do you think there should be some extra special effort, extra special activity, or is there something that can be done?
Yeah, I think that there is also a few things that need to be done, because I mean we are kind of in catch-up mode, because these people have more or less lost 1 or 2 years, right, of kind of social interaction like we've used to know them before, and therefore you need to come up with kind of special formats, whether it's kind of a get back to the office party, whether this is, for example, special formats, coming back to the office, maybe things should sometimes even happen mandatory in the office, that there is this coming together and this getting together. And also in the trainings, probably there needs to be a higher emphasis on this community building, on this collaboration aspect, and maybe sometimes make the conscious decision to rather make a phone call or go back to somebody versus simply writing an email. So I think there is now this conscious focus needed to get this more or less right.
Yeah, it seems like it's not going to solve itself. Like, we have to actually work at it to make it better. Rose, I wanted to bring something that you said to me at the beginning. We had a quick conversation with regards to flexibility, and you said to me that it's actually flexibility is about tailored individual experience of everybody, and it should be part of a greater well-being. And you spoke about 4 pillars. I thought that was brilliant. Could you just give us a bit more insight into your thoughts?
In Zurich, we have a comprehensive wellbeing program for our colleagues. There are 4 pillars to it. The focus on mental health, which was talked a good bit this morning on. Focus on physical well-being. That's generally led by our sports and social team who look after that. Then our involvement in the community is the 3rd pillar. And the 4th pillar is our overall financial well-being. So we put a lot of emphasis on the financial well-being of the people. There's overwhelming evidence to suggest that there's a direct connection between your health and your longevity, your life expectancy, to your financial position. We know that the affluence of an area in which a person was born, their educational attainment, whether they live in a privately owned house or whether they rent from the local authority, whether people have access to central heating or not, that all impacts on a person's health. So, and of course, you can only do those things if you have money. So there's a direct connection between the 2 things, and it's one I think there's an opportunity. We talked about the last 2 years been difficult for chief people officers or chief pandemic officers. I think the next 2 years are going to be tougher, and maybe that's an area that they can bring in. Because a lot of employers here in this audience actually have good employee benefits and good pension schemes and so on. For their people. So to put an emphasis on that, for the HR and get their providers to do more work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like an area we were speaking, you mentioned that as well, and I think Lisa from Aon mentioned that as well, like the role of HR leader, CPO is constantly evolving, and we've seen it even more now. But that could be maybe less obvious area that HR individuals could take over. Obviously, finance typically belong in finance, but realistically, we're all running our individual enterprises called our individual lives. Everybody needs money coming in order to get it out. So that, I think, is a very, very good point, and maybe not so obvious to most current setups. It's probably the topic that HR could proactively champion themselves a bit better.
That's what I would say. They should grasp the opportunity and look at it in a more holistic way as well, because we know that the needs of a 27-year-old is different to that of a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or whatever. Some people might be struggling to pay next month's rent, whereas somebody else might have accumulated a lot of money and need help on planning out how to use it. So to bring that in and to champion it, it can take some of the stress off the HR person. They can lead it, but the provider can do all the work, you know, through a comprehensive engagement program.
And just to build on what Rose said, I think this is currently probably coming up to everyone's mind, right? Also over the upcoming quarters, once we are hopefully also having a little bit more clarity on the Ukraine situation, right? When maybe also there's more stability on the financial market side of the house, that people think a little bit more forward. And I recently came across a very interesting conversation where somebody told me, hey Christian, there are 3 important elements: time, money, and know-how. And you always need to leverage 2 of them to get more of the 3rd one. And if you think about this moving forward, that's, I think, a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I just wanted to bring it kind of together. We spoke about future. So is there any particular trend that you see that emerges going forward? Because I think we speak about robots, we speak about engagement. Is there something that we should all get ready for? Christian?
Well, my personal perspective is that what we just shared here right now is more or less a situation where we are just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And we got to be ready for this. So for that reason, there's curiosity and constant learning, and also being interested in being kind of a co-shaper or being in the driver's seat for all of this. I think this is very important. And number 2, I feel embracing technology is certainly a big one as well. So I think there will be no way around technology. But we also got to be careful that we focus on what we are good at, right? In terms of human beings, there's always this concern, oh my God, machines will take over. I think this is presumably not happening.
Well, hopefully they'll help, yeah? Because I
Exactly.
have loads of stuff that machine can do for me. Right?
Exactly. So it needs to be the right mix here as well. But I think there's no way around not embracing technology. I think this is something we all need to be very good at and very strong at. And we need to focus on what we are good at as human beings, which is empathy, which is non-linear creativity, which is also complex problem solving as a team, also working internationally. So you should, or one should learn foreign languages, not because one needs a translation, but rather to maybe learn about complex cultures and different mindsets. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do.
Excellent. And Rose, your top tip to make sure that, that we have a bright future of work ahead of us?
Yeah, there's no doubt the next few years are going to continue to be difficult, and you know, as Christian said, you know, self-development is very, very important, but challenging times always present opportunities.
Of course.
One thing for sure is that I've never ever seen leadership presented to anybody on a plate. Anybody who's in a leadership position has gone after it and grasped an opportunity, and that's what I would say to all the HR teams and everybody else in the audience. Watch out for the opportunity for you and grasp it.
Brilliant. Well, sadly, to me certainly, hopefully to you as well, we're out of time. So thank you so much for your contributions today. Thanks a million.